Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Eruvin Daf Chavtes. We're 8 lines from the top of the Amud. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava. Rava announced to his Talmidim, Hareini ki ben Azai b'shukei Tveria. I'm like Ben Azai in the marketplace of Tveria. Let's take a look at Rashi, 7 lines from the top. Hareini ki ben Azai b'shukei Tveria. Yoimu b'dicha havlei l'Rava. Rashi says, Rava was in a pleasant state of mind. V'amalu l'talmidav, and he called out to his Talmidim, Hashta tzili da'atoi. I right now have clarity of mind. V'hareini mezuman, I'm available. L'hashiv b'charifos. L'chol mi shishaleni. I have the ability to respond with sharpness, with accuracy, to any question, to anybody who's going to ask me a question. And he compared himself to Ben Azai, who was very clear-minded and very deep. Ki Ben Azai shoya dorish b'shukei Tveria. Like Ben Azai, who used to say his drashos in the marketplaces of Tveria, and he was very deep. There was nobody in his generation who compared to his clarity, to his sharpness, his depth. And actually, Ben Azai used to say, all Chacham of Klal Yisrael before me are like klipas hashum, like the thin peel of a garlic. Except for this specific Chacham, Kareach, this was a Rishum and Karcha. So Rava called out in his pleasantness, he says, I'm ready to respond to any question. Says the Gemara. So one of the individuals that took advantage, so one of the Rabbanans there turned to him and he said, if one establishes an Eruv using apples, how many apples are needed for the Eruv? What is considered mazoin of shtei su'udos, amount needed for 2 meals when it comes to apples? So Rav responded, how do you even know you can use apples? Who says you can use apples for an Eruv? Perhaps Rav held that since it's merely used as a dessert, it's not significant enough to be considered an Eruv. Or perhaps, as others say, the apples in the time of the Chachamim, the time of the Gemara, perhaps hard, not so tasty. So Rav challenged him, how do you even know you can use this? Says the Gemara, why not? Do you mean that you cannot use apples? V'atanan. We went to the Mishnah where it indicates that apples are suitable for Eruv. The Mishnah says as follows: Kol ha'oichlin mitztarfen. All types of foods can combine, can be mitztarif, livsel es hagvia, b'chatzi pras. So we're speaking about if a person ate food which is tummy, so this goes ahead and disqualifies him, livsel es hagvia, is the body, it disqualifies the person from eating truma. How much tummy food is to be eaten to arrive at that point? B'chatzi pras. So a half of a pras. A pras actually also means half. Pras means a half of a loaf, which is used for the Eruv, which has 2 meals in it. So chatzi pras means half of that half. Rashi says this equals the volume of 2 eggs. So that amount of tummy food eaten by a person disqualifies him from truma. Now the Mishnah is telling us all types of foods can combine to arrive at this quantity. If you have a chatzi pras consisting of many different types of food, then you arrive at this halacha. Likewise, you can combine all types of foods to arrive at the quantity of a mazon shtei sudos, 2 sudos worth of food, in order to establish the Eruv. So all types of foods can be used for that. You can combine various foods to arrive at the quantity of a kebetza, which is needed for tumas oichlin. So if the food is tamei, you need a kebetza in order for it to have the ability to transfer tumah to something else. So here we see that all types of foods are suitable or fit for Eruv, including apples. So that's more v'haimai tuyufta. What's your raya from here? Perhaps your kash is mishum diktani kol ha'oichlin, because the Mishnah says all types of foods can be used for the Eruv. And apples should be included, they're edible. Says the Gemara, but the Mishnah, which sets forth a klal kol ha'oichlin, is not necessarily an accurate generality. Tell us, one doesn't have the ability to derive conclusively from even a general term which was set forth by a Mishnah or a Brisa. Even when the Tana specifically exempts certain things, he lists a list of exceptions. Still, perhaps we can perhaps think that there's something omitted from that list, and it's not an accurate list. So you can't really conclude, even from a general rule stated in a Mishnah or Brisa. Likewise here, although the Mishnah says Kol ha'oichlin, all types of foods can combine to create an eruv, perhaps apples are accepted from this rule. Ella rather mishum dektani ubemazon shtei sudas le'eruv. The Mishnah says all foods can combine to make the eruv. Ukebeitzel tamatumas oichlin, and to tamatumas oichlin. And now we know that apples certainly conform to that. They have the ability to tamatumas oichlin. V'hani nami, the apples as well. B'nei tumuye tumas oichlin inu. So if they have the ability to tamatumas oichlin, and the Mishnah seems to lump together these two things, indicating that something which is mitamatumas oichlin can be used for an eruv. Therefore, we conclude that apples are fit for eruv. Says him, okay, once we've established that's okay for eruv, how many apples are needed? Vikama. Amar Rab Nachman tapuchim bekav. You need to have a kav amount of tapuchim. Meisvei, we have a kasha from a brisa, which seems to tell us we don't need that much. Rab Shimon Lazo Omer, so this is discussing Maiserani. Perhaps take a look at Rashi inside, who gives us the background to this brisa. If you take a look right at the off to the right side here, Rab Shimon Lazo Omer says Rashi, Rab Shimon Lazo b'Maser Oni Shemachalkoi Lanim Harbe Al Goren Koi. Speaking about paupers who are coming down to the farm, to the goren, to the threshing area, and the farmer is distributing Maiser Ani. And he'd like to know, what is the minimum requirement? What is the smallest amount that he can give per ani? And the Bryce will tell us, the least, the minimum amount given to the ani are these amounts listed in the Bryce. How do we get to a minimum amount? Less than these amounts, a significant amount, that's not called giving. You have to grant. You have to do nesina. Therefore, you need to have a shir chashiv. Let's get back to the brisa. Meisi of Shimon Lazo Omer. He gives us the quantities. He quantifies for us what is the minimum amount to be given for the ani with regards to all these types of foods listed in this brisa. Uchla tavlin. So when we speak about giving tavlin seasoning, we need to give an uchla. Rashi says that's an eighth of a litra. A litra, he says, is a lug. Some say it means a half a lug. So this amount of seasoning is sufficient to be granted for the ani. And we're soon going to learn that all these shiurim have something in common. They're considered mazon shtei sudas, sufficient for 2 meals. So it's very similar to the concept of eruv. And Shimon Lazo lists for us the various quantities which pertain to each individual type of food and how much is needed of this particular item for the 2 meal use. So an uchla of tavlin, a litra of yarak, of vegetables, va'asore, a goizin 10 of these nuts, perhaps we're speaking about walnuts, v'chamisha of farsikin, 5 peaches, ishneim rimoinim, 2 pomegranates, esrog echad, and 1 esrog. So this was the price. V'omar gusak bar dori, mshmei, Rav Menashe bar Shaguvli. So Gusak bar dori quoted Rav Menashe bar Shaguvli, mishmei the Rav, who taught us Neo Rav, v'chein le'eruv. The same din, the same shear applies to eruv as well. What's the connection? Let's take a look at Rashi inside, off to the right, immediately to the right. V'chein le'eruv. Says Rashi, the chelik ani begoren, because the portion that is granted to the ani at the goren nami mazen shtei su'udes hikalam el kamon. That's also the amount equivalent to the 2 sudas, and therefore we apply that shear to eruv as well. Says the Gemara inside. Now, once we know that these shiurim apply to eruv, so if the Brisa tells us that how many peaches are needed? 5. So why, when it comes to apples, do you say you need a kav, which is much more than 5? Let's compare apples to peaches. Says the Gemara, Bahani Nami, apples as well. Let them have the halach of peaches. and 5 should be sufficient. Says the more you can compare. Hani chashivi, peaches are prominent, are significant, are chashiv. Vani lo chashivi, as opposed to apples, which are insignificant, and therefore need more in order to establish this erev, which is creating the makam dira. You need a larger quantity. Perhaps you eat more of it, it's more of a staple. Whatever the svara here is, it's not so chashiv, and therefore more is needed to be reckoned with. So let's take a look at Rashi inside. Again, right off to the side. This is the Rashi following the one we just saw. This was the Gemara's kasha. Let apples have the same din as a farsikin. Let 5 be enough. Answers the Gemara, there's a difference. Peaches are chashivi. Come on. The Gemara will tell us soon. What is the rule of thumb when determining the quantity of a specific food for the erev? Says the Gemara, it depends what type of food we're speaking about. It depends on people's eating habits. Meaning, if it's a staple food, for instance, bread, then you need a full 2 sudos worth of bread. But when we're speaking about something which is merely eaten as a side dish, as a lifton, as an accompaniment to the bread, then you need 2 side dish amounts, sufficient for 2 meals. Or if something is eaten as a dessert, or as a dip, they need 2 dip amounts, 2 dessert amounts. So it's all relative to its position, its place in a person's menu. Says Rashi, and the Gemara tells us later, Kol shul lifton, any food which is eaten as a side dish, as an accompaniment to bread, how much is needed? The amount which is needed to be used as a side dish with the bread. Alma apparently love mamash sudos. We don't literally need 2 full sudos worth of this food. We don't need that the entire meal should consist of this item. Everything works according to its prominence and its place, its hierarchy in a person's menu. Im lifton, if it's something which is an accompaniment to bread, then the shear is as much as needed for 2 side dishes, 1 side dish per meal. If it's something that's coming as a dessert, then we need 2 dessert amounts. So it's all relative to how it's eaten. So that explains why 5 peaches are sufficient. Apparently it's used as a dessert, and that provides dessert for 2 meals. But getting back to the apples, which are not chashiv, we need a much larger quantity. Continues the Gemara. Amar of Yosef, Sharale Mari is Hashem. Sharale, you should release him, you should forgive him. L'Rav Menashe bar Shuguvli. Hashem should forgive him. Why? Because he went ahead and he quoted this statement from Rav, which was V'chein le'erev, the same quantity, the same shiurim applied to erev. He attributed to the brisa mentioned above. Says Rav Yosef, it was erroneous. I myself taught this quote, the name of Rav, to Rav Menashe, Amas Nisan, and I attributed it to the Mishnah, the upcoming Mishnah. Vu Amra Brisa, and he attached it to the Brisa, which is erroneous. Which Mishnah are we speaking about? That's not. So getting back to the shear of Meiser Ani, which is meant to be distributed to the pauper at the farm. What is the least amount distributed to the ani when it comes to the threshing area? You can't give him less than the following amounts. Then a half a cup of chitin, a cup of so'irin. A half a cup of so'irin is enough. A cup and a half of spelt. A kav amount of dried figs. Oi, mana dvela, mana is a weight amount of dvela of these pressed figs, which were measured by weight. Rabbi Kiva, a pras. A half a mana is enough. Continues the Mishnah, mechatzi lug yain, a half a lug of yain. Rabbi Kiva, a revius a lug. Or revius shemen. Rabbi Kiva, a sheminius, an eighth of a lug is enough. So that's pertaining to these items on the list. What about other types of produce? Shar kalaperis. Amar Bashal, you need to give him enough, sufficient amount that he can take that and go ahead and trade it for 2 meals, sell it off, and use the proceeds to purchase food for 2 meals. Kadei sheyim kareim, must give him enough so that he has the ability to sell it, v'ikach behen, and purchase with them mazon shtei sudais, the food for 2 meals. V'amar Rav, on this Mishnah Rav said, v'chein le'eruv. The same halach applies to eruv, which requires 2 sudais, and it is determined by the shiurim mentioned in this Mishnah. So this was Rav Yosef challenging. He says, Rav interpreted, he applied his statement to this Mishnah, not to the aforementioned Brisa. Says, what difference does it make? There's no machlekes between the Mishnah and the Brisa. Each one is putting forth its own list. The Brisa has a list, the Mishnah has a list. There's no machlekes between the two. So what difference does it make where Rav said his statement? My umei dahai mehach. What's the superiority of the Mishnah over the Brisa? Ilim, is it because Mishum dekotani bahach tavlin? Because in the earlier Brisa, it contained on its list seasoning, tavlin. But tavlin lav ne'achilinenu. That's not suitable for human consumption. You can't eat it outright. And Yosef perhaps holds that that's not suitable for an Erev. Therefore, you must not attribute Rav's statement v'chein le'erev to that brisa which contains seasoning, which is not suitable for erev. Says if that's the problem, why is the Mishnah any better? Does not the Mishnah also mention wheat, barley? No one eats wheat and barley. So apparently, that's not a deterrent. Meaning, okay, so wheat and barley is not suitable for the erev, but Rav can still discuss the concept of v'chein le'erev, that these shurim apply to erev, pertaining to those items which are edible. So why was Rav Yosef so adamant that he must not attribute Rav to the Bryce? Ella, rather, it's for the following reason. Because the Mishnah mentions the share of a half a log of wine, which is exactly the share that Rav set forth for the Erev. V'amar Rav. And the Talmidim of Rav quoted Rav as saying, as holding, that's the exact share required for Erev. Ma'arvin b'shtei reviyah shal yain. One needs to have shtei reviyos, 2 reviyos halug, which means a half a lug in total, of wine for the Erev. Now, how did Rav know this? Mid'ba'in kuli hai. The fact that it requires so much, shma mena, apparently, ki amar Rav v'chein le'erev, aha masnisa ka amar. Apparently, when Rav held that the Erev has the same din as the Ma'aser Ani, it was pertaining to this Mishnah. He derived it from this Mishnah. And it was on this Mishnah that he issued forth that halacha. And that's how the Talmidim knew that the share of wine needed for Erev are 2 reviyos, a half a lug in total, which is the same share as the Ma'aser Ani mentioned in this Mishnah. Shma mina. Indeed, this concludes this discussion. It's pretty obvious that Rav said his din on this Mishnah rather than the Brisa mentioned earlier, and therefore Rav Yosef objected to Rav Menashe attributing the quote of Rav to the Brisa, because the Gemara concluded Shema Mina. We concluded conclusively that Rav's statement meant to be on the Mishnah. Amar Mar, so we just learned of Mazon Shtei Sudas LaErev, that when it comes to establishing an Erev, you can go ahead and gather together or combine various types of foods which total a quantity sufficient for 2 sudas and establish an Erev. Savar Rav Yosef L'Meimer, so Rav Yosef figured, Ika Suda Mahai, Suda Mahai. And when one combines 2 different types of foods, he needs to do as follows. Take 1 meal's amount from one type of food, and another suda's worth from a different type of food. And that's how you'll combine it. But you can't split things. You can't take a half a suda's worth from this type, another half from this type, another half from another type, because each type needs to have a full quantity, a full suda quantity. We mentioned there are various different shiurim pertaining to different types of food. Figs and pomegranates and the wheat, and all these different things. So, unless you have a full share, a suda, from that type, it's not worth anything. You can't take a half a share suda from one thing and a half a share suda worth from the other thing. You can't combine in that way. It needs to be a full share suda from each type. Amalei Rabba disagreed. He said, even a half, a third, and a quarter. You can combine all different types of food in any which way that you would like. Gufa, we just learned Amarav. The amount of wine needed for the Erev are 2 reviyos haluk, for a total of half a luk. Says the Gemara, do we require that much? Vatanya. In the Brisa, we seem to say otherwise. How much wine is needed for the Erev? The amount of wine needed to dip your bread in it. They said dip their bread in all types of dips, including wine. So that's how much wine is needed. 2 dip amounts. The amount of dip needed for 2 meals. You don't need the amount of wine needed for drinking purposes. You can merely reckon with the wine used for a dip, and that's sufficient. Likewise, chometz, vinegar, which is also used as a dip for meat, for vegetables. Enough vinegar to be used as a dip for 2 meals. Olives and onions, to be used as a side dish for shtei sudas. So you use that as a side dish, as a accompaniment with the bread. That's how much you need. You don't need the full meal's amount of onions and olives. They're merely used as a side dish. So that's how much you need. 2 side dish portions. So apparently you only need a small amount of wine. Why does Rav require a half a lug? Says in Hasam, the Bryce is speaking about b'chamra mavashla, cooked wine, which is suitable for dipping. Therefore, a small quantity is enough. Whereas Rav is speaking about uncooked wine, which is meant for drinking purposes, and therefore a larger amount is needed. Amar, we just learned chometz, how much vinegar, kedei l'tabel boy, the amount needed for dipping. Amar Rav, Gidol Amar Rav, kedei l'tabel boy, mozoin shtei sudei shel yarok. How much vinegar is needed? The amount sufficient for dipping 2 full meals of vegetables. Meaning, your entire meal consists of vegetables. That's a large amount of vegetables. Some say, a smaller amount. You need enough dip for the yarok hanechal b'shtei sudas, for the vegetables eaten within 2 sudas, when you're having bread and the vegetables merely being used as a side dish for the bread. So it's a much smaller amount of vegetables. Amar, we just learned zaysim of solim, olives and onions, to be used as a side dish for 2 meals. Can one use onions for the Erev? It's harmful, it's dangerous. We learned in a price. There was once a time Shavas Rav Meir Bar Diska. Rav Meir spent his Shabbos in this town at Diska. And a certain fellow came before Rav Meir, a person who lived far away and actually walked over by employing the Erev Tchumen. Amar Loi, so he turned to Rav Meir and he said, Rebbe, Iravti b'tzolim l'tivin. I used onions to make my Erev, to allow me to walk from my city all the way to the town of Tivin, and I stopped off here along the way. Rav Meir heard that he used b'tzolim. That's not suitable. That's an invalid Erev. V'yeshiva Rav Meir ba'arba amish shalai. Rav Meir sat him down within his 4 amos. Why? That's halach. If a person walks out of the Tchum on Shabbos, such as this person who was unjustified in walking so far on Shabbos, so he's as though he left his Tchum. He says stay within his 4 amma cubicle, which is considered a person's personal space, and he can't go out of that area. So apparently onions are not suitable for an Erev. Says Malay Kasha, the terrace is like this. Ha ba'olim. Rav Meir was speaking about using the leaves of the onions, which are not suitable, they're harmful. Taisis Yantav says we're speaking about the portion that protrudes past the top of the onion. So that's dangerous. Habi mais. Whereas the batzel discussed earlier that is suitable for the Erev is speaking about the actual bulb and the root of the onion, which is okay. The Sani is learned in a price. Ochal batzel. If a person ate an onion, the dangerous part of the onion, v'ishkim, v'meis, and he got up in the morning and died. Ein oimrim. There's no wonder. Ein oimrim. Nobody says. No need to say mimameis. Why did he die? What was the cause of death? V'amar Shmuel explained. Loishano. This is only a concern. Ela ba'olam. Regarding the leaves, the actual onion itself, less than there's no concern. U'ba'olin nami lo yamarin. Even with regard to the leaves, there's no concern. Ella, the lo ya'avtzel zirsa. If those leaves have not yet developed properly, they haven't grown, lo ya'avtzel means they haven't grown. Zirsa is a shear of zeris, distance between the tip of the pinky and the tip of the thumb. It's in half an amma. So it hasn't yet grown that large. But if it has developed up to that point, less than there's no concern any longer. Amar Papa, lo yamaran. This whole concern regarding eating onions is only elderly shichra. If you hadn't drunk beer following the onion. Papa was a beer maker. So only if he hadn't drunk beer. But this fellow drank beer, less than there's no concern there whatsoever. One should not eat batzal on account of the juice that is contained in the batzal, which is dangerous to one's health. There was a story of Chanina she'achal chatzi batzal. He ate a half of an onion, and half of the moisture and the juice was in it. And he fell dangerously ill. Ubikshu chaver rachmalov, and his friends asked Hashem for rachmanis on his account. V'chaya, and he recovered v'pnei. Why did they invest this effort v'pnei sha'ashah tzrichalei? Because Klal Yisrael needed him at the time. Therefore, the chaverim davened for his sake, and Hashem responded by having Rav Chanina recover from his illness. Amar Abzeira Mashmo, Sheikhar beer. One can use it for the Eruv, although beer, as Taisus explains, is mostly water. Still, it's considered to be a beverage and can be used for the Eruv. That's one part of Shmuel's statement. On the other hand, let's say this beer is mayim shuvin. It was contained in a kli, and then this large amount of beer, which is 3 lugin, falls into a mikveh. This qualifies the mikveh. Just as we know that ordinary mayim shuvin disqualifies a mikveh. Now we're speaking the mikveh wasn't yet filled to the shear of 40 sa. So if it's an incomplete mikveh and then 3 lugin of mayim shuvin, drawn water, fall into that mikveh, it disqualifies the mikveh. So Shmuel is presenting us with two sides of the coin here. On the one hand, sheikhar is considered to be like water and can disqualify mikveh. On the other hand, it has the quality of a beverage and can be used for the Eruv. Maskal Rav Kana asked the kasha, Pshita, isn't this self-evident? Of course it can disqualify mikveh. Why would this be different than made seva, than cold water? This non-Jews learned in the Mishnah, made seva, if cold water falls into the mikveh, it makes the mikveh puzzle. If this made seva has an amount of 3 lugin of mayim shuvim, so why would I think the beer is different? What's the chiddush of Shmuel? Says more Amri, the Gemara answered, Hasam, maya de tziva mikri. The made seva is called maya de tziva. It's called water. It's classified as water. Therefore, it has a halach of water. As opposed to beer, it's called beer. Therefore, perhaps I would think it's no longer classified as water. It doesn't have that ability to make a mitzvah. Like the apostle comes Shmuel and tells us it does. Now that we know that beer is suitable for the Eruv, how much beer is needed for the Eruv? Sover of Acha Breder of Yosef. So Rav Acha, the son of Yosef, figured, Kamei Rav Yosef, they present in front of Yosef, Lemeimer, to say, Betrain Rivi Shechru. We need 2 quarters. Rashi says, we're speaking about a quarter of a cup, which is a lug. So 2 lug of beer, a very large amount of beer, which is actually 4 times the amount of wine needed for the Eruv. As Rav told us earlier, we need a half a lug of wine. When it comes to beer, which is less chashav, less prominent, we need to have 4 times that much. 2 lug. How do we know that this is the ratio we're meant to employ? Because it's not as learned in the Mishnah. Hamoitzi yayin. What is the share of the malacha of haitzah if one carries into Shasarabim? What is the share for wine? Hamoitzi yayin kedei mizigas hagois. There's enough wine there that can be used to properly dilute a cup, a glass of wine. That is considered to be sufficient wine if one carries it out to Shasarabim Yitzchayv. Explains the Gemara, Latani Allah, and the Brisa explained this halacha. You need enough wine to properly dilute a kais yafa, a nice kais. What does that mean? My kais yafa. Kais shel bracha, the kais which is used for bracha, bracha samazon. How large is that kais? The Omar of Nachman, Omar Rab Rabba. Kais shel bracha. How much raw wine needs to be in that kais? It needs to contain a quarter of that cup. So we're speaking about a kais shel bracha, which is a revius halog, and a quarter of that needs to be pure wine. So that when you dilute it, because you dilute 1 part wine with 3 parts water, so when you end diluting it, you'll have a revius, kadei shim zegenu. So when you dilute it, v'yamid a revius, it will result in a revius amount. Uked Rava, as Rava taught us. And that's the proportion that's employed by diluting. The Amar Rava called chamra. If you don't have a high quality wine that can't be diluted properly, it's not worth anything. Kol chamra, any wine, deloy dori, al chad, tlasmaya, that is not diluted using this proportion. Al chad, meaning you don't mix on one. It doesn't have the ability to mix 1 versus 1 portion of wine, tlasmaya, 3 portions of water, meaning you can't dilute it 25% wine versus 75% of water. It doesn't have that ability. It gets too weakened. Lav chamru, it's not really wine. So the point here is that the shear of Haitzah pertaining to wine, pure wine, is a quarter of this kais. This kais is a revius. And since the proportions are 25 wine versus 75% water, so a quarter revius of pure wine is sufficient. A sufficient quantity shear for Haitzah Shabbos, in order to total, after diluting, a revius of this diluted wine. Uktani seifa. Now, that was the share of wine, a quarter of the revius. Now, what about other types of mashkin, other types of beverages? What is the share over there? Uktani seifa. The Mishnah proceeds and says, Shar kala mashkin. What is the share regarding other types of beverages? Berevius. The revius halog. All types of wastewater also has a share of revius. Says the Gemara, Mida Hasam, the fact that we see that over there, the contrast between wine and other beverages is times 4. Because the share of wine is a quarter of the revius. The share of the other beverages is 4 times that much. You have 4 revius. Mida Hasam, from the fact that we see that over there, it's al chad arba, it's times 4. For every 1 of wine, you need 4 times as much of other beverages. So apparently wine is 4 times as chashav, as significant as the other beverages. Hachanami, here's what when it comes to Eruv. We want to employ this formula. Al chad arba. That went to multiply by 4. So if the share of wine is how much? A half a lug, as Rav taught us over here. So what is the share when it comes to, for instance, beer? How much is needed to establish the Eruv? 4 times as much, which is 4 times a half a lug equals 2 lug, as the Gemara suggested earlier. Says Maloi, it's not necessarily so. You can't compare the 2 things. Hasam, over there, when it comes to determining the shear of Haitzah of Shabbos, yes, over there we need a much larger quantity when it comes to the other beverages. Hasam, who, the batzam yihachim, because less than that amount, like chashiv, doesn't have proper chashivas. And significance and prominence is the determining factor when it comes to determining the share of Haitzah. In contrast to Erev, Aval Hacha, by Erev, lie. Perhaps you don't need that much. Why? Because here, it's determined by personal eating habits. Davidi Inchi, and people are accustomed to doing the following. The Shasu Kasu B'tzafir, they'll drink a cup of beer in the morning, 1 revius. The Kasu B'panya, another cup in the evening. V'samchidu, and they'll rely on those 2 cups, meaning just 2 glasses of a revius of beer are sufficient for 2 meals. So perhaps that's all you need. You only need twice revius of beer, just as the share of wine is 2 revius. Continues the Gemara. Tomorrow in Bekama, how many dates are required to establish the Eruv? Amar Rav Yosef, tomorrow in Bekaf. Just as we learned earlier, that the share of, for instance, Groigros, the dry figs, is a kav. Says Rav Yosef, the same thing will apply to dates. Amar Rav Yosef. How do I know that a kav of dates is sufficient? It's certainly enough. You don't need more than that. How do I know? Because we know that dates are actually considered to be higher quality fruits than figs. And if a kav is sufficient for the figs, certainly for the dates. How do I know that? The sign is learned in the Bryce, which will prove to us that dates are considered to be higher quality produce than figs. Ochal gregris. This is pertaining to a person who inadvertently ate truma. So he had those figs of truma, and now he's coming to pay it back. Vishilim tomorrow. So he paid back, instead of paying back figs, he paid back dates. Tavai olav bracha. A bracha. He's deserving of a bracha, because he paid more than he ate. So what are we speaking about? What method did he employ when he paid back the food? Was he working according to value? He had a zuz worth of figs, become a shalom bezuzah, and he responded by paying back a zuz worth of dates. This is what he do. My tavel of bracha. Why is he deserving of a bracha? Bezuzah achal, bezuzah become a shalom. He ate a zuz worth and he paid back a zuz worth. Apparently, he was working according to amount, quantity. The ochal mine greva the gregers. He had a greva, an amount of figs, the shavi zuzah, which are valued at a zuz. And when it came to paying back, he was gracious. Become a shamle graver the tmarim. He paid back the same amount, the same quantity, but instead of figs, he paid dates, the shavi abba, which are worth 4. And that's why the Brisa says a bracha should land on him, should come to him. He's deserving of a bracha because he paid more than he ate. He paid something of a higher value than he ate. Alma tmarim madifi. Apparently tmarim are superior to figs. Amalei Abaye, not necessarily. Perhaps figs are even higher quality than dates. And perhaps the story in the Brisa was as follows. Lo'olam, actually the achal minei bezuzah. He had figs which are valued at a zuz. Become a shalom bezuzah. And he responded by paying back dates which are valued at a zuz. Umay tell a bracha. Why does the Brisa say he's deserving of a bracha? Not on account of him paying more in value, but simply because he paid something which was more attractive, more marketable, something which has higher demand, can be sold easier. That's why he gets a bracha. He ate something figs, which is not something which is sold easily. There's not so much demand for it. So kafetz alei zvina literally means zvina, the customers don't jump on it. It's not something which is in high demand. But when it came to paying back, he was gracious. He paid back midi, something the kafetz alei zvina, something which is easily sold and has high demand. So actually, you have no raya that dates are regarded higher in value than figs. Perhaps just the opposite. Why does this fellow get a bracha? Because he responded with something that can be sold easily, and therefore he gets a bracha. So pertaining to the halacha of the shir of Eruv, you have no raya. You can't say, well, if kav is sufficient for the groigros, which are lower value, certainly for the tmarim, not necessarily a tmarim higher in value than groigros. Continues the Gemara, shesisa. What is the amount of shesisa needed to establish the Eruv? So Rashi says this is a macho which they would make from roasted flour, putting some honey in it. So this type of paste or drink, how much is needed? Rav Achavar Pinchas trei shargushi, 2 large spoonfuls. Kisani, what is the share of these roasted grains? Abaye trei buni de pumbedisa. Buni pumbedisa was a certain measurement, and 2 of these measurements. Amar Abaye, Amarli aim, my caretaker told me. Hani kisani. So she told me these roasted grains, malu liba, are beneficial for one's heart, and do away with a person's worry and anxiety. Abaye, Amarli aim. My aim told me, this wasn't actually his mother because he was an orphan, it was his caretaker. She told me, if one is experiencing weakness in his heart, This is what he should do. Laisi, he should bring bisra, the atma, yemina de dichra. He should bring meat from the atma yemina, the right thigh, the dichra of a ram, and eat it in this manner. V'laisi kibuya, the re'isa, he should bring the waste of bakar, of cows, of large animals, the nisan, in the month of Nisan, and use it as charcoal. V'ileka k'vuy the re'isa, if you can't find that waste, laisi sugaini darvasa, you should bring chips of the arava tree, chips of aravas, v'nichbave, and should take these, either the waste or the arava, and turn it into a charcoal, and roast his meat over this charcoal v'nechol, and eat it, v'nishti basrei, and follow it by drinking chamer marka, diluted wine. Omar Rabbi Shmuel, getting back to the concept of the shtei sudas of Erev. Says Rabbi the name of Shmuel, who went to follow the following formula. How much is considered shtei sudas? It depends how this particular food is meant to be eaten. If it's meant as a staple food like bread, then you need the entire 2 meals worth of that bread for the Erev. If it's merely something eaten as a side dish, they need 2 side dish amounts. As a dessert, two dessert amounts. As a dip, 2 dip amounts. Says Rabbi Shmuel, kol shu lifton, any food which is eaten as a lifton, as a side dish, as an accompaniment to bread, then you need the amount which is sufficient to eat the bread with this for 2 meals. Kol she'eni lifton, something which is eaten on its own, not as a side dish. How much is needed? The amount which will be eaten during the 2 meals of this food. Meaning, if the entire meal is meant to be eaten with this food, then you need that much food, the amount of 2 sudas worth. Says there are some examples. Basar chai, raw meat, some say we're speaking about salted meat, or as the Yavit says in Bavel, they were accustomed to eating raw meat. So the meat is meant to be a primary element of the meal. Therefore, we must calculate as though the entire meal is consisting of this meat. You need 2 full meal worths of this meat. Basar tzoli, what about roasted meat? Now we have machlekes. Is it meant to be eaten on its own or together with bread? That will determine the amount needed. Rabba Amar Kedei Lechel Boy, the amount needed to eat the bread with this roasted meat, which is a smaller amount of meat. So the amount needed to conduct 2 meals in this manner with this roasted meat. Rav Yosef Amar Kedei Lechel Himenu, need a much larger amount. 2 full meal worths, when the entire meal consists of this roasted meat. Amar Rav Yosef, how do we know we're meant to calculate with this larger amount as though the entire meal consists of this meat? Because in Persia, they eat this meat directly without the bread. These Persians eat the pieces of these roasted meat, but without bread. So apparently, we're meant to reckon as though the entire meal is made up of this meat, and therefore a larger quantity is needed. Not only Abaye, Persians consist of most of the world. How can you determine the halach of everybody else based on the minhag of the Persians? The rest of the people don't eat roasted meat as their main staple of their meal. It's merely eaten as a side dish, as an accompaniment to bread. Therefore, a small amount is sufficient. We're not meant to determine the halachas for the rest of the world based on individual or just a specific locale. Vatzanan, how many learned in the Mishnah? Big de anim lanim. If we have a small sized beged, a small patch, which is merely 3 etzbois, 3 finger widths, by 3 finger widths, that's small enough to be used for a pauper, to be used as a patch on his beged. So that's considered to be a beged for the ani and his makabaton. Big de anim, this small size beged, which is suitable for the anim, la'anim, is makabatuma for the ani. Big de ashirim la'ashirim. But when we speak about an asher, wealthy person, for him, this small patch carries no value, and it's not makabatuma for him. Only if he has a large size piece of material. Big de ashirim, Rashi says, 3 tefachim by 3 tefachim, that's a prominent piece of material, and is considered a beged for the ashir. Aval big de ashirim, lanim loy. But a pauper doesn't need to have a large size of material for him to consider it a beged. Even a small piece of material is sufficient to be considered a beged for ani. Let's take a look at Rashi up on top of the Amid. Ava big de ashirim, la'anim loy, kalaymar. This is what the Gemara means to say. La'anim loy be'inan, big de ashirim. For the paupers, we don't need the big de ashirim. Ella, kiva dildedu chazu. Since for them, even a small patch is considered a beged, it's useful. Asli basrai, we follow them. Meaning, the ani considers this a beged, so for him, it's a beged. Although, for the usher, this is insignificant. Here as well, when it comes to the Eruv. Although you've told me that the Persians, for them, this roasted meat is not eaten together with bread. They make a whole meal out of it. Therefore, you require even a larger amount to make the Eruv. The amount of 2 full meal worths. But that's their opinion. That's their way of life. Since for us, it's used as a side dish. This could be shir zuta. Even a smaller share should be sufficient for us. So we're comparing both halachas. Meaning, just as over there, the ani requires only a small beged, because for his purposes, it's fully fine. It's sufficient for use. Likewise, when it comes to the Eruv, since for us, this small amount of meat is useful for 2 meals, because it's merely eaten as a side dish, that should be enough for our Eruv. Says the Gemara, the chitem, perhaps you'll say, we always go to chumrah. Hachal chumrah, but hachal chumrah. When it comes to the Kabbalah's tumah, we're stringent. We say, well, okay, the small patch, since it's suitable for the ani, it's makabel tumah. And when it comes to the Eruv, as well, we'll apply a chumrah. We'll say, all people need a large amount of meat to establish Eruv. We'll go to chumrah. Says the Gemara, we're not meant to do that by Eruv. We're meant to be lenient. We want to follow the smaller share. V'atanya, but we learned in the Brayz. Ma'arvin l'chayla. So a person was unwell, or a zaken, an elderly person. Well, how much food is needed for them? As much as they need for their 2 meals, which is a very small amount. Or the ravsan, and conversely for an overeater, person who's gluttonous, who eats large-sized meals, we don't calculate based on his meals. We apply the Suda Baininus amount, the average size meal, shall call Adam, of your ordinary person. So apparently when it comes to Eruv, we go to Kula. The Chayil and the Zaken, we're very lenient with them. They can even have a smaller share than your average person's meal. When it comes to the Ravsan, we say, we follow the standard meal size. So we always go to Kula. By the Ravsan, we follow everybody else's standard. By the Chayil and the Zaken, we follow their standards, as long as it ends and results in a Kula. So likewise, when it comes to the meat, since most of the world eats it as a side dish, we're not meant to calculate based on the parsoim, who eat a large amount during their meals. So even a small amount should be sufficient for the Eruv. Says more kasha, indeed, we leave it off with the kasha, unresolved. Why? Rav Yosef insisted that we need a large amount of meat for the Eruv. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. We learned about the concept of mazayin shtei sudas le'eruv. In order to establish the Eruv, you need to have the food quantity, which is sufficient for 2 meals. Now the Gemara explains for us that it all depends on what type of food we're speaking about. If it's a type of food which is used as a primary element of your meal, for instance, bread, then you need the entire 2 meal worths of that bread. But if it's something which is eaten as a side dish, lafes a pas, or as a dip, then that's what you reckon with. You need 2 side dish amounts, 2 dip amounts, as Rashi says, 2 dessert amounts. The Gemara gave us some examples. For instance, peaches, 5 is enough. It's used as a dessert, it's chashiv. When it comes to other types of fruits, like tapuchim, groigrois, figs, tamarim, according to the Shita of Rav Yosef, the shir is a kav. These things don't have the same prominence as a farsikin, and we need a greater amount for the Eruv. When it comes to wine, Rav tells us 2 reviyos, which means a half a lug. When it comes to shecher, the Gemara tells us that 2 reviyos are also sufficient, because a person will drink a cup in the morning, a cup at night. That is sufficient to be considered like 2 sudas. The Gemara tells us regarding roasted meat, according to Rava, It's used as a side dish, and therefore that's how you calculate the amount. As much as is needed to eat together with your bread in 2 meals. Now regarding being metzaref, different types of foods, Rav Yosef says, you need to have at least 1 suda worth of each type. You can take 1 suda volume of one type, combine it with another one, and make your eruv. Rabbi says you can mix and match all different types of foods, take a half a suda worth from one type, a quarter of the other type, put it all together, as long as the total amount equals 2 sudas. The Gemara concluded, when it comes to calculating, establishing the share of eruv, we always go the kula, we follow the lenient path.